There is a quote that is attributed to G.K. Chesterton. He is credited with saying, "Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and not tried." He's saying it's not like people have tried to live the Christian life and it didn't live up to its promises. They realize that it's really, really hard to be a Christian, and a lot of people don't even try. I believe, and I think you probably have to believe this or you wouldn't be here this morning. I believe that Christianity is the best life. This is the life I want to live, the life with Christ, the life that is empowered by Christ. Barry did a better job than most of you know as we were singing this morning of picking out songs that support this theme. I mean, he did a great job this morning. Not I, but Christ through me. That's what makes this life with Him so great. It's not what I'm doing so perfectly for Him. It's what He's doing in my life. It's a great life. But you're fooling yourself if you think it's an easy life. It's not an easy life. When God calls us to be like Him, that's not easy. He wants us to struggle and strive every day to be like Jesus. How you doing? I find that to be incredibly difficult. It's not that I don't understand it. I've read a lot about Jesus. I know what Jesus is like. I know the things that He did. I know what He taught. I understand it. I'm not confused by it. I'm saying that's hard to do. It's hard to be. I want to be like Jesus. I imagine you wouldn't be here this morning if you don't want to be more like Jesus. Sure you do. Have you ever noticed the harder you try, the more difficult it becomes? This, I don't know if you can see it on the slide. It's kind of dark there, but I asked Kristen to prepare this, and there's a line that goes up and down. Years ago, Charles Williams made this comment to me: spiritual growth is not a straight line activity. Where, if you kind of draw on a page at the lower left, and you draw a straight line to the upper right, that you're going to start your life with Jesus, and it's just going to be this straight line of growth day after day. Well, that's not going to happen. There are ups and downs, there are distractions and detours and hurdles and times where you hit a spiritual plateau and it doesn't feel like anything positive is happening in our relationship with God. But I want to tell you this. The key to growing in our life together is a determination that we are never going to quit. We're never going to give up on the work that God is doing in our lives. When we stumble, we're going to stumble in God's direction. And even though sometimes we're going to experience pain or discouragement, we might even feel a little bit embarrassed by choices that we've made, we are not going to quit. And when I think about that idea, that growing in our life together, in our life with God, is not a straight line activity, this idea of setbacks and disappointments, I'll just tell you, the person that I think about in the New Testament is the Apostle Peter. A lot of us, I think, look at the Apostle Paul. We can't quite wrap our minds around that. That man's life is so intimidating to me. I look at Peter, though, and I think I can relate to that guy. That's somebody that I can understand. The biblical account of his life is not always flattering. He's a great man of God, but he makes a lot of mistakes. He's impetuous, he's impulsive, he's over-eager. Failure and disappointment are just part of his track record with God. In one of the earliest encounters with Jesus, Jesus is standing by the lake of Gennesaret. People are crowding around him, listening to the Word of God, and because of the crowd, he gets into Peter's boat, asked him to put out a little bit from the shore, and he sat down and he taught the people who were standing there. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Peter, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." Peter says, "Master, we've worked hard all night. We haven't caught anything." You know, I think translation is, "Hey, preacher, you stick to preaching. I'm a fisherman. I'll do the fishing." But he did do what Jesus told him to do. He said, "Because you say so, I'll let down the nets." And when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. In this early encounter with Jesus, Peter is skeptical. He's reluctant. As we will often find, he is headstrong. He didn't want to obey. But when he did, great things happened, and his eyes were open to who Jesus really was. And you remember, he fell at Jesus' feet. And this is something you love about Peter. It's something you relate. You can relate to this. "Go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man." The closer you get to Jesus, the more you see the darkness and the sin in your own life. The closer you get to the perfect holiness of God expressed in Jesus, the more aware you are of how fallen you are in this life. An even more familiar blunder is the time that he walked on water and then he sank. And again, you see the impulsive nature. "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." And before he knew it, there he was. He's out of the boat. And he's walking on water. And the rest of the disciples must think that guy's out of his mind. They had the good sense to stay in the boat. He had the faith to get out. But then he gets to a point where he's far enough away from the boat, but not close enough to Jesus to start wondering, "What in the world have I just done?" And he panics. He saw the wind and the wave, and he was afraid, and he started to sink. But notice this, even as he was sinking, he had the confidence in Jesus to cry out to him. Folks, can I just pause right there? So, sometimes you're daring and you're trying to do and you're trying to trust, but you get afraid and you fall short. In that moment, do what he did. He said, "Lord, save me." That was the right thing to do. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" These are the kind of interactions we come to expect between Jesus and Peter. Peter sometimes reluctant or hesitant, difficult. Other times he submits to Christ. He did some remarkable things. But while daring greatly, he also failed miserably. Even after being rebuked for his little faith, Peter never stopped trying. On another occasion, I think his reason, in his mind, his motives were right. He tried to stop or prevent Jesus from going to the cross. This is in Matthew 16, 21 through 23. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests and teachers of the law, that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside. Can you imagine this? He pulled Jesus aside and he began to rebuke Jesus. "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." Jesus turned and said to him, "Get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me. You don't have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." I can't imagine that there's anybody here this morning that can't relate to what Peter intended. He loved Jesus. He wanted to protect Jesus. He was thinking from a human standpoint. And here's what he didn't know. He didn't know the plan of God. And without realizing it, he was trying to dissuade Jesus from the very thing he came into the world to do. He's speaking when he should have been listening. But you have to love the fact that he was a big enough man not to quit on Jesus. Even after being called Satan, or being condemned as a stumbling block, or being rebuked for not having in mind the things of God. Those words had to sting, but Peter didn't give up. Then there's the time that he refused to let Jesus wash his feet. Something the disciples should have been doing for one another and for Jesus, but not a single one of them was humble enough to serve the others. So Jesus seized the moment as a teaching opportunity. He got up from the meal. He took off his outer garment. He wrapped a towel around his waist. He filled a basin of water, and he started to wash the disciples' feet. When he came to Peter, Peter said, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? In the sense of the statement is, Jesus, what are you doing? Here is the brash and bold Peter speaking without thinking. You shall never wash my feet. He's the master of the absolute statement. This shall never happen to you. You will never wash my feet. I will never disown you. No shades of gray in Peter's thinking. Everything is black and white. He couldn't see the lesson that Jesus is trying to teach. Couldn't conceive of a scenario where it made sense for Jesus to do what he was doing. And again, he needed to be corrected. You don't realize what I'm doing later, you'll understand. As you read through the Gospels, you almost start to feel sorry for Peter. He seems to make the same mistake over and over again, and that's why we're talking about him this morning. How many times have you gone to God in prayer and it's the same thing? It's not a new area of struggle. It's that same area where you have prayed so many times in the past. One of the biggest problems is speaking when he should have remained silent. And we see that in Matthew 17, the great transfiguration of Jesus. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them to a high mountain by themselves. He was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun. His clothes became as white as the light. And just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, I'll put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my son whom I love. With him I'm well pleased. Listen to him. And when the disciples heard this, they fell face down on the ground, and they were terrified. I don't know exactly why it was wrong for Peter to say what he said. I don't know if it was just wrong for him to even speak in that moment. Are you like that? I laughed a little bit because I always feel like somebody ought to say something. I talk in my sleep. I mean, you understand that? And it's a sacred moment, and Moses and Elijah, they're there to talk to Jesus, and maybe it was just not the right time, and maybe it's because he's going to honor this representative of the law and the prophets as equal with Jesus. I'll make a tent for all of you, for each of you. All I know, again, is that he was often speaking when he should have been listening, and on at least one occasion he was sleeping when he should have been praying. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, Sit here while I pray. And he took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. Can you imagine not just being one of the 12, but one of the more intimate 3 and called aside, and it's obvious. He is distressed and troubled, and he told them, My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here. Stay here and keep watch. And going a little farther, he fell to the ground and he prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. And he returns and he found them sleeping. Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep watch for an hour? Watch and pray that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, body is weak. That happens 2 more times. I'm overwhelmed. And I don't want to be alone. And I want you to pray. And he comes back and they're sleeping. And then there's the time that he tries to defend Jesus with a sword. A typical Roman cohort consisted of 600 soldiers. In all likelihood, there are hundreds of battle-ready Roman troops in and around the garden that night. But when a mob comes to arrest Jesus, Peter steps up. He doesn't hesitate. He pulls out a sword. Hey, of course he had a sword. I mean, but he's a fisherman. He's not a swordsman. I think he's trying to take this guy's head off, but he missed. And he just got his ear. I think you would defend people you love. I think that would feel like the right thing to do. But Jesus rebuked him sternly. He said, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." You think I can't call on my Father and He will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legion of angels? It's hard to be called out in front of your friends, but imagine how much more it hurt to be chastised in front of a host of enemies that were assembled there that night. Everything we set up to this point pales in comparison to what comes next. And every Bible student sitting in a pew this morning, you know what's coming. Jesus prepared them. He told them that He would be betrayed and that He would be killed by the Jewish religious leadership. And He told them that they would desert Him, that they would deny Him, but Peter said, "No way." Now, all these other guys, they may disown you, but Lord, I'll never disown you. Never. In fact, even if I have to die, I'd die before I disown you. He knew He said it. And everybody else knew He said it. Luke 22, starting with verse 44. They seized Him and led Him away, bringing Him into the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. And a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, "This man was with him." But he denied it. He said, "Woman, I don't know him." And a little later, someone else saw him and said, you also are one of them. But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how He had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you'll deny me 3 times." And he went out and he wept bitterly. Can you put yourself in that crowd? He's following, but he's following at a distance, and he's watching. His eyes are on Jesus, and he's keeping an eye on all that's happening. And someone comes up and recognizes him, and he denies it. And someone else comes up and recognizes him, and he denies it. And a third comes up, and in one translation or one of the Gospels, he says, "I never knew that man." And then Jesus, whom he's been watching, turns and looks right at him. Have you ever felt that? That was his. He had a lot of bad moments. That was his worst moment. And the person he loved the most, the one he admired more than anybody else, the one he wanted to please so desperately, turned and looked at him. And he went out and he wept bitterly. Have you ever failed so terribly in your life with God that when you tried to tell Him about it, when you tried to pray about it, there were no words. All you could do was weep bitterly. He made a promise. He said he would never deny Him, that he would rather die than deny Him. And then in front of everybody, he said, I don't know that man. Can I tell you this? Somebody here this morning needs to know this. Just because you tried and you dared to be something good for Jesus and you failed, that doesn't mean you don't love Him. I think we look at people sometimes and we reach the conclusion they must not love Jesus. You think that Peter doesn't love Jesus? You remember afterwards we call it the reinstatement. Do you love me, Lord? You know that I love you. Do you love me, Lord? You know that I love you. Do you love me? It hurt him that he asked him 3 times, do you love me, Lord? You know that I love you. You know I love you. You know what's interesting about Peter? After all of that, he still has the keys to the kingdom. After all of that, he is still the one preaching on Pentecost. He's the one who opens the door of the kingdom to the Gentiles. He's the one carried along by the Holy Spirit who gives us 2 of the 27 books of the New Testament. Sometimes as we pursue godliness, we're going to fall short of the glory of God. We're going to struggle. And it's going to be bitter. And sometimes distressing and embarrassing and painful. There are going to be times like Peter that we're going to weep bitterly. Because we want to be better. I want you to know I don't doubt that. I believe that about you. I want to be better. You want to be better. And because of our love for God, it hurts when we disappoint Him. Here's the key of our growing in our life together. It is not flawless perfection. It's being humble enough to start over again. And I think this is the crucial point. Because there will come a time for each of us when we have to decide, am I going to give up in despair? Or do I have enough faith to believe that even though I've failed so terribly, that God is great enough to still do something wonderful in my life? I think you all know why we're talking about Peter this morning and not Judas. Judas didn't have the faith, and he didn't have the humility to start over again. Peter did. You know, he might, for the rest of his life, and even all these years later, he might be remembered as the guy that denied Jesus. He might have had to live with that for the rest of his life. And there might be some decisions that you've made, and you think those decisions define you. You think you're going to have to live with the reputation of your past for the rest of your life. And listen, we can't erase other people's memory of our worst moments. We can't erase our own memory of those moments. I'll tell you what you can do, though. You can have the humility of a man like Peter and the faith of a person who did not allow their failures to keep them from a bright future. It hurts to fail. It hurts to fall short of the glory of God. But the grace of God makes something incredible possible. It makes it possible for your worst moment to be forgiven and for you to start over again. I love that. I couldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. If I went back to God and I said, I did it again, Lord, and He said, well, I already gave you grace. You already got grace. Do you know, when we read Romans 6 and it says, should we continue in sin that grace may abound, God forbid, that we should also back up to chapter 5 where it says, where sin abounds, grace abounds more and more. And I want to tell you this morning, if you look at your life and say, I have abounding sin, I want you to look at your God and know He has abounding grace for all your sin. So do not give up. And if you need to come home to Him, do it right away. Do it this morning as we stand and sing.